The whole town of Silver Creek packed into the little white church to watch a hanging that was called a wedding. The pews groaned under ranchers and miners, ladies in faded Sunday dresses, and rough men who smelled like sweat and whiskey. No one came to celebrate. They came to see if the stories were true. They came to get a look at the most dangerous mountain man in the Montana Territory and the unlucky girl forced to marry him. Abigail Carter stood at the front of the church in a simple blue calico dress that used to belong to her mama. Her hands shook so hard she had to twist the fabric just to keep them still. She was 20 years old, with soft brown hair pinned tight, and eyes that always tried to see the good in people. Today those eyes stared straight ahead at the wooden cross on the wall, because she could not make herself look at the man beside her. Elias Boone. To the town, he was not a man. He was a legend, told in low voices near campfires, a trapper who lived alone high in the Bitterroot Mountains. Folks said he killed 3 men in a mining camp brawl, said he once dragged a wounded grizzly off a boy with his bare hands, said he could track a man through a river and shoot a crow clean from the sky at 100 yards. Some called him a hero, most called him a killer. To Abby, he was a stranger who had just bought her like a mule. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, voice trembling as much as Abby's hands, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Abby felt the weight of a dozen eyes on her back. She could almost hear the whispers. Poor thing. Carter's girl. Selling herself to Boone to pay that no-good father's debts. Her father stood near the door of the church, hat in his hands, eyes shining with something that was not shame. It was relief. The gambling markers were cleared. The ranch would not be taken. He would sleep easy tonight while she walked out of this church with a man everyone feared. Abby swallowed hard. She had begged her father to find another way. Work the ranch harder, sell more cattle, anything. He only said one thing. "You like your brother's eating, girl? You like a roof over your head?" Elias Boone offered to pay the whole sum. "Man wants a wife who can read and cook and keep house. You ought to be grateful." Grateful. The word tasted bitter as gunpowder in her mouth. "Abigail Carter," the preacher said, "do you take Elias Boone to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" The church went so quiet, Abby could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. For one wild second, she thought of running, of bolting down the aisle, past her father's startled face, out into the cold fall air. She pictured the road out of town, the yellow grass bending in the wind. But where would she go? Her mother was buried on the hill behind the Carter ranch. Her younger brothers needed food. There was no place for a runaway girl in this hard land. She lifted her chin. Her voice came out small but steady. "I do." A murmur rippled through the church. Then the preacher turned to the man beside her. Abby had not looked him full in the face since he walked in. She had only seen glimpses. A tall shape in a worn buckskin coat. Broad shoulders. Dark hair brushing his collar. Hands rough as tree bark. "Elias Boone," the preacher said, "do you take Abigail Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" The silence grew heavy again. Abby felt the air change beside her. Slowly she let her eyes slide sideways, just enough to see him. He was not what she expected. His face was lean and sunburned, with a scar that cut through his left eyebrow and faded along his cheek. His jaw was dark with stubble, his mouth set in a firm line. But it was his eyes that froze her. They were not wild or cruel. They were a strange, stormy gray, watchful and tired, like a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. Those eyes met hers for the first time. In that brief moment, Abby felt something she did not understand. Not safety, not fear, something in between, a question, a warning. "I do," he said, voice low and rough, like gravel rolling in a stream. It sent a shiver down her spine. The preacher spoke the final words, hands shaking as he closed his Bible. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana and in the sight of Almighty God, I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." Abby's breath caught. Her heart leaped into her throat. She had not thought past this moment. She had not thought about his mouth on hers, or his hands, or the life waiting beyond the church doors. Panic rose like a wave. Elias stepped closer. She could smell pine, smoke, and leather on him, the cold air of the mountains clinging to his coat. His hand lifted, and she flinched before she could stop herself. The church noticed. A few women, T-S-K-E-D, under their breath. A miner snickered. For a long second, Elias just stood there, looking at her. Then, instead of grabbing her or forcing a kiss, he bent his head slightly and brushed the lightest touch against her forehead. It was barely more than the brush of a feather, but the whole church gasped. It was not a kiss of a man claiming a prize. It was something else, something that made heat rush to her eyes. "Let's get you out of here," he murmured, so soft only she could hear. They walked down the aisle together, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. The townsfolk parted, some nodding, some staring, some whispering about the strange, gentle kiss from a man with a violent name. Outside, the sky was heavy with gray clouds. The wind cut sharp as a knife. Elias led her to a big bay horse, hitched to a wagon loaded with supplies, and a second saddled mare tied behind. Her father came out and clapped Elias on the shoulder, not even looking at Abby. "Much obliged, Boone. You got yourself a good worker there. Girl knows how to keep a house." Abby's cheeks burned. Elias turned his head slowly, and for the first time his voice turned cold as steel. "She is not a worker," he said. "She is my wife." Her father's smile faltered, but he said nothing. Elias helped Abby up into the wagon, his large hands surprisingly careful at her waist. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, she realized she was shaking again. The road to the mountains stretched long and empty before them. They rode in silence for miles, the town shrinking behind them, the land rising and roughening ahead. The wagon creaked. The horses snorted. The wind tugged at her hair. "You scared of me?" he said finally, eyes on the trail. It was not a question. Abby swallowed. Her fingers twisted in her skirt. "I do not know you," she answered, "but I know what people say." He gave a short breath that was almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. People say a lot of things. The sun dipped low by the time they reached the foothills. Pine trees thickened, the air turning colder and sharper. At last, a small log cabin came into view, built snug against a rock outcrop, smoke curling from the chimney. It was lonely and rough, but not unkind. Elias pulled the wagon to a stop. He hopped down and turned to help her. "Welcome home," he said quietly. The word home twisted in her chest. She stepped down, boots crunching on the frozen ground, heart pounding so loud she thought he must hear it. He carried her trunk inside with ease. The cabin was simple. A stone fireplace with a steady fire burning. A table and 2 chairs. Shelves lined with jars and tools. A narrow bed against one wall and a cot rolled up nearby. Everything neat, nothing wasted. Abby stood in the doorway, hands knotted, waiting for whatever kind of man she had just married to finally show himself. Elias set the trunk down, then turned to face her fully. The firelight threw shadows across his scarred face. His gray eyes met hers again, steady and unreadable. "Abigail," he said, voice low, "there is something you need to know about this marriage." "About why I really came down from the mountains to get you." He reached up, slowly unbuckling the gun belt from his hips and laying it on the table between them. "You were not bought," he said. "You were saved from something worse." Quote, Abby stared at him, her pulse racing, as he lifted his head and spoke the name of the man she feared most in the world. The name dropped into the small cabin like a stone into deep water. "Roy Maddox," Elias said. Abby's fingers went cold. She wrapped her arms around herself without thinking. Her mouth went dry. Roy Maddox owned the biggest spread outside Silver Creek. He owned half the town's debts, too. Men whispered his name the same way they spoke of winter storms and snake bites. A bad thing you prayed passed you by. Abby had seen him only a handful of times, but that had been enough. The way his pale eyes crawled over people. The way he smiled when someone lost it all at his card table. "He wanted you," Elias said quietly. Abby shook her head as if she could shake the words loose. "He wanted the ranch," she managed. "My father said that was all." "Your father lied," Elias answered. There was no softness in his voice now. Maddox did not just want the land. He wanted you tied to his house where no one could say a word, where there would be no preacher and no vows, only his rules. Her stomach twisted. Memories rose she had tried to bury. The day Maddox came to the ranch with his men. How he leaned against the corral fence, hat tipped back, eyes on her like she was a mare he might buy. How his hand had brushed her arm when she passed with the water bucket, fingers pressing a little too long, a little too hard. Her father had laughed it off. "He is just playing," he said. "Man is rich. You ought to be flattered." "I told him no," Abby whispered. "I told him I would never step foot in his house." Elias nodded once. He does not hear the word no. Abby sank down into the nearest chair. The fire popped behind her. The room felt too small, the air too thin. "How do you know all this?" she asked. Elias leaned his hands on the back of the other chair, head bowed. For a moment he did not answer. The flames painted lines of tiredness around his eyes. "Because Maddox's men killed my brother," he said. The words were plain and flat, but each one cut sharp. Abby looked up, shocked. "Killed him?" "Name was Daniel," Elias said. "Younger than me. Thought the world still had more good than bad in it. Hired on with Maddox to wrangle cattle. When he saw what Maddox was doing to folks who owed him money, he tried to walk away. Men like Maddox do not let witnesses walk away." Abby stared at him, trying to fit this new piece into the picture she had of the wild, dangerous mountain man. "That is when you went into the mountains?" "After I buried him," Elias said. "After I made Maddox pay for it as much as the law would let me. Sheriff said there was no proof. I lost my temper. There was a fight at the saloon. 3 of Maddox's men did not walk away. Sheriff gave me a choice. Jail in a town owned by Maddox or the high country, where I could not cause more trouble. And they all said you were the dangerous one," Abby whispered. Elias gave that short, humorless breath again. Suited Maddox fine to have it that way. Men fear what they do not understand. Abby pressed her fingers to her temples. Everything she thought she knew spun around her. So why come back now? Why risk it? Quote, "Because the sheriff sent word up to my trap line," Elias said. "Told me Maddox was calling in your father's debt. Said Maddox wanted you in his house by the end of the month, or he would take the ranch and throw your brothers out in the cold." Sheriff knew what that meant. He also knew the law would not stop Maddox if your father agreed to it. So he wrote me a letter. Said there was a girl about the age my brother would be if he lived. Said she needed a way out. Maddox could not touch. He lifted his head. His gray eyes were steady on her. "I came down to town with every dollar I had," he told her. "I took the markers myself. Maddox hates me more than any man alive, but he hates losing money worse. The only way to close that door on you was to open this one. Marriage. Legal. Tied to my name, not your father's or Maddox's." Abby's throat tightened. "You saved me to get back at him," she said slowly. He shook his head. "No, I saved you because I could not save Daniel. Maddox can glare all he likes. The law cannot make a wife leave her husband's home and move into another man's bed. Even in a place as rough as this, that much still means something." He picked up his gun belt, then laid it back down again, as if to show he did not need it for this talk. "You are safe here, Abigail," he said. "I will not touch you unless you ask it. I will not make you share my bed if you do not want to. We can be strangers under one roof until you trust me, or until you never do. But I will not let Maddox lay a finger on you. That is my word." She stared at him, heart pounding, the most dangerous man in the territory saying he would do nothing unless she asked. Every story she had heard cracked down the middle. "Why are you telling me all this?" she whispered. "Because you deserve the truth," he answered. "You did not choose this. The least I can do is not lie to you." Silence fell between them again, but it felt different now. Less like a wall, more like a wide, uncertain space they both stood in. At last, Abby drew a slow breath. "Where do I sleep?" she asked. Elias straightened. "You take the bed," he said at once. "I will use the cot by the fire." "It is your cabin," she said. "It is our cabin now," he corrected. He rolled out the cot and set it near the hearth, his movements quick and sure. Abby opened her trunk at the foot of the bed, stacking her few dresses on the shelf he cleared. As she worked, she noticed small things she had been too frightened to see before. A second cup and plate already set out on the shelf, extra blankets folded at the end of the bed. A small bunch of dried wildflowers hanging near the window, their colors faded but still gentle to the eye. "You planned for someone," she said softly. "Sheriff's letter came weeks ago," Elias answered. "Had time to think." They ate stew that first night, sitting across from each other at the rough table, the fire casting long shadows. Elias ate in silence, but it was not the heavy, angry silence she had known in her father's house when he lost at cards. It was the silence of a man who had forgotten how to speak much. "Do you read?" she asked as she washed the bowls. He hesitated, not well. "I can teach you," she said. The offer slipped out before she could think better of it. "I taught my brothers their letters." His eyes met hers, a flicker of surprise there. "I would like that," he said simply. That night, lying alone in the narrow bed with the quilts pulled to her chin, Abby listened to the wind slide around the cabin and the quiet creak of the cot as Elias turned over by the fire. Her fear did not vanish, but something else settled beside it, a strange, fragile sense that maybe she had not been thrown to the wolves. Maybe she had been pulled from their jaws. Morning came gray and cold, with snow clouds piling over the peaks. Elias handed her a worn coat he had patched at the sleeves. "Work to do if we are to eat through winter," he said, "only if you feel strong enough." She followed him outside. They chopped wood, hauled water, checked the snares he had set in the trees. Abby's arms ached, but the ache felt honest, different from the dull tiredness of endless chores done under sharp words and sharper looks. They were coming back toward the cabin with an armload of kindling when Elias suddenly stopped. His body went still, head tilted, eyes narrowing toward the trail that wound down from the lower ridge. "What is it?" Abby asked, heart jumping. "Riders," he said. "3, maybe 4. Abby strained to listen. Then she heard it too, the faint thud of hooves, the jingle of harness. A shout carried thin on the cold air. "Could be hunters," she said, though her voice lacked faith. "Hunters do not ride this high in a bunch." Elias set the wood down and took her by the arm, steering her toward the door. His hand was firm but gentle. "Get inside. Bolt the back shutter. Stay away from the window." Her blood ran cold. "Do you think it is Maddox?" "I think a snake does not like having something taken from its teeth," Elias answered. He grabbed his rifle from beside the door, checking the chamber with quick, practiced hands. "Go on." Abby hurried inside, pulse hammering. She dropped the wood, fingers fumbling with a shutter latch. Through a crack in the front window she saw them appear on the trail. 4 men riding hard, breath smoking in front of the horses. Roy Maddox led them. His long black coat flapped in the wind. His pale eyes found the cabin and narrowed with satisfaction. He raised a hand, and the men behind him fanned out like wolves, circling. Elias stepped off the porch, rifle cradled easy but ready in his hands. He moved with the quiet of a man who knew how to stand his ground. Maddox pulled his horse up a few yards away. Snow crushed under hooves. The other men's hands rested near their guns. "Well now," Maddox called, smile thin as a knife. "Heard a rumor my little bride ran off to the mountains." "She is not your bride," Elias said. "She is my wife, and my wife is not yours to take." Maddox laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Law may say different. Debt was made in my name. Girl was part of the bargain." "The debt has been paid," Elias answered. "In full." Maddox's gaze slid toward the cabin window like he could see through the wood. Abby shrank back, heart racing. "Abigail," he called, voice slick as oil, "you come out now, and I might be generous. Might leave Boone breathing." Abby's hand shook on the latch. She could feel the pull of fear, the old habit of obeying men who held the power. But then she remembered Elias's words by the fire. "You are safe here. I will not let Maddox lay a finger on you." Outside, Elias shifted his stance. The air felt like a wire stretched tight between him and Maddox. "I will give you one chance to turn your horse and ride back down that trail," Elias said. "You and your men walk away. No one gets hurt." Maddox's smile faded. His eyes went flat and cold. "You forget, Boone," he said softly. "You are not the only man who knows how to kill." He jerked his chin. 3 hands moved toward 3 guns. Abby slammed her eyes shut as the world held its breath, her heart beating so hard it hurt. Then the crack of a gunshot split the mountain air. The shot slammed against the mountains, rolling back in echo after echo. Abby flinched and grabbed the window frame. For a heartbeat, she thought Elias had been hit. Then she saw one of Maddox's men drop his gun with a howl, clutching his bleeding hand. Smoke curled from the barrel of Elias's rifle. He had shot the gun clean out of the man's grip. "Next one goes where I aim for," Elias called, voice like iron. The other 2 riders jerked their horses sideways, startled. Maddox did not move. His pale eyes were narrow now, his smile gone. Snowflakes drifted between them, slow and lazy, as if the sky did not care that men might die below. "You got sharp aim for a man who claims he does not want trouble," Maddox said. "I do not want trouble at my door," Elias answered, "but I will not run from it either." Inside the cabin, Abby's heart beat so hard it hurt. Her mind raced. She could stay hidden and hope Elias won. Or she could do something harder, something that had never once worked in her father's house. She could stand beside him. Her hands shook as she lifted the bar on the door. The wood felt heavy, but the weight in her chest felt heavier. She opened it and stepped out onto the porch. Cold air slapped her face. 4 pairs of eyes swung her way. "Abigail," Elias said sharply, without taking his gaze off Maddox. "Get back inside." "No," she said. The word surprised even her. It came out steady, clear enough to cut through the wind. Maddox's gaze slid over her, slow and possessive. "There she is," he said softly. "Little ranch girl trying to play mountain wife." Abby walked down off the porch until she stood beside Elias. Her knees were weak, but she kept her shoulders straight. She could feel the heat of his body next to hers, the tension in him like a drawn bowstring. "You do not speak for me, Mr. Maddox," she said. "You never did." Maddox chuckled, but his eyes were not amused. "Your father signed a contract," he reminded her. "Debt for land and daughter. That mountain stray there cannot change ink with a kiss and a trip to the preacher." Abby's cheeks flamed, but she did not look away. "My father sold whatever he could to save himself," she said. "He forgot something. I am not cattle. I am not a wagon or a field you can pass from hand to hand. If I marry, it is my choice." "You did not choose this," Maddox said, jerking his chin toward Elias. Abby swallowed. The truth of that stung. "Maybe not at first," she said. "But I choose now. I choose to stay with him. I choose to be Abigail Boone and not Roy Maddox's secret." Elias glanced at her then, just for a second. Something raw and unguarded flickered in his eyes. Respect. Surprise. A threat of warmth she had not seen before. Maddox's face darkened. "You think saying it out loud makes it real?" he asked. "Paper is what matters in this territory. Not feelings. Not some mountain man's rough promise." He snapped his fingers at one of his riders. "Show him," he said. The man with the good hand pulled a folded stack of papers from his coat, waving them like a prize. "Markers signed by Carter," Maddox said. "Agreement for his daughter. Witnessed at the saloon. Sheriff himself stamped it." "That is true," another voice called. All heads turned. Down the trail, more riders appeared, moving at a slower, steadier pace. At their head rode Sheriff Tom Briggs, his coat buttoned tight, his old sorrel horse puffing steam in the cold. 2 deputies rode behind him, rifles in their scabbards. Maddox's jaw tightened. "Sheriff," he said, "good of you to come settle this." The sheriff reined in between the two groups, eyeing the dropped gun in the snow, the blood on the man's hand. He took in Elias's rifle, Abby's pale face, Maddox's thin smile. "Looks like I arrived just in time to stop a burial," he said. "Boone drew first," Maddox said quickly. "Shot my man in cold blood." "He drew when your men reached for their guns," Abby said. "I saw it. He shot to stop them, not to kill." The sheriff's eyes flicked to her, then to Elias. "That true?" he asked. Elias nodded once. "I warned them," he said. "You know I do not shoot to wound by accident." Sheriff Briggs sighed. "I do know that," he said. Then he turned to Maddox. "I also know something else. Those papers you are so proud of are not worth the ink on them anymore." Maddox's head snapped around. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. The sheriff reached into his coat and pulled out his own stack of papers. He unfolded them slowly, like a man who wanted every word seen. "Carter sold his debt," he said. "Signed it over to Elias Boone. I stamped that too. Makes Boone the creditor now, not you. Last week Boone came into my office with payment in full. Cash. No tricks. I marked those markers paid and void. As of that moment, you had no more claim on Carter's land. Or his daughter." He held the paper up. The deputies shifted in their saddles, hands resting near their guns, eyes on Maddox. Maddox's face went red, then white. "You cannot do that," he snapped. "Deal was made with me." "Deal was debt," the sheriff said. "Debt can be sold. You know that better than anyone in this territory. You built half your empire that way. Only this time the man who bought it paid honest and did not use it to chain some girl into his house." He looked at Abby, and his lined face softened just a little. "Marriage at the church, in front of witnesses, with vows," he said. "That stands. Boone here did things the right way for once." A faint, startled laugh bubbled up in Abby's chest at that. The sheriff gave Elias a long look. "You always said you hated the law," he added, "but you sure used it clever this time." Maddox's eyes burned with fury. "You think I will just ride away?" he hissed. "After he killed my men, after he stole what was mine." Elias stepped forward. "I stole nothing," he said. "You tried to buy a woman like a wagon. I bought a debt and offered her my name. She can leave me whenever she wants. She cannot leave what you had planned without breaking the law and her own soul." Something broke in Maddox's control. His hand flashed toward his gun. The deputies' rifles jumped, but Elias was faster. His rifle cracked, the sound sharp and final. Maddox screamed, dropping his gun as blood poured from his shoulder. He toppled from the saddle into the snow. One of his men lunged for his own weapon, but a deputy's shot sent it spinning away. Abby clapped a hand over her mouth. She had seen men fight before, seen fists and anger and drunken brawls. She had never seen anyone shoot to wound on purpose, twice in one day. Elias walked forward slowly, rifle still in his hands. He stopped over Maddox, who lay groaning, clutching his shoulder. "You killed my brother," Elias said quietly. "You ruined more lives than I can count. There was a time I wanted to put a bullet right between your eyes and call it justice." Maddox stared up at him, teeth gritted, fear plain in his pale eyes at last. Elias shifted his grip on the rifle. Then he turned it and handed it, stock first, to the sheriff. "But I am done letting you make me into the monster in everyone's stories," he said. "You live, you stand trial. You answer for every man you ruined without me putting another mark on my soul." The entire ridge went still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Sheriff Briggs took the rifle slowly. His eyes were wide, like he could not quite believe what he had heard. One deputy swung down to bind Maddox's hands while the other kept his gun ready. Maddox cursed and spat, but the fight had gone out of him. The sheriff looked between Elias and Abby. "Town is going to talk about this for years," he said. "Boone, the man they all called a killer, shooting to save lives and handing me the gun." "Let them talk," Elias said, voice flat. Abby slipped her hand into his. His fingers closed around hers, strong and rough and careful. By the time the sheriff and his men rode away with Maddox, the snow had begun to fall in earnest, big heavy flakes that stuck to coats and hair. Elias and Abby stood together on the porch, watching the trail fade white behind the retreating horses. Inside, the fire was burning low. Elias shut the door and leaned his rifle against the wall. His shoulders sagged a little, like a man who had been holding up the sky and finally set it down. "You all right?" he asked. Abby nodded, though her legs still trembled. "Are you?" she asked back. He looked genuinely surprised at the question. "I will be," he said, once my hands stopped shaking. He held them out, and she saw it was true. The great, dangerous mountain man's fingers trembled, not from cold, from the weight of what he had chosen not to do. Abby stepped closer. "You could have killed him," she said. "I know," Elias answered. "You wanted to," she said. "I know that too. And you did not." He met her eyes, gray and tired and honest. "I am so tired of burying men, Abigail," he said. "My brother, those 3 in the saloon, others whose faces I can barely recall. Killing Maddox might have felt good for a moment. Then it would have followed me into every cold night that came after." She reached up without thinking and laid her hand against his cheek over the faded scar. His breath caught. "You shocked them all today," she said softly. "The sheriff, Maddox, the men with him. If Silver Creek hears what you did, they will not know what to do with their campfire tales." "Let them tell whatever stories they like," he murmured. "Only one person's opinion matters to me now." "Whose?" she asked, though her heart already knew. "Yours," he said. Silence filled the cabin, warm and thick. The fire popped. Outside, the storm gathered. Inside, something gentler was forming. Abby thought of the girl who had walked into the church in her mother's blue dress, feeling like a lamb led to slaughter. She thought of the man beside her now, the one everyone whispered about, the one who shot to wound twice and handed his gun to the law. "I was forced to marry you," she said slowly, "but I do not feel forced now." His jaw clenched. "If you ever want to go back to town," he said, voice rough, "if you ever want to live with your brothers on that ranch, I will not stop you. I will build you a house with my own hands if it means you feel free." She smiled then, small and real. "You stubborn man," she said. "Do you not see it?" Quote, "See what?" he asked. She took his rough hands in both of hers. "I am already home." Something in his face broke open, like ice thawing in spring. The cautious, guarded look he always wore slipped away for a moment. In its place was a man who had lost everything once and never thought he would be given anything back. "Abigail," he whispered. She rose on her toes and kissed him, not on the forehead, not the careful brush he had given her in the church. This time she chose. This time she guided. His hands came up slowly, resting at her waist, as if he was afraid too much pressure might scare her. When she did not pull away, he drew her closer, still gentle, still more careful than any man with his reputation should be. The snow fell outside the cabin. The stories began to spread in Silver Creek. They said the most dangerous mountain man in the territory had ridden down from the high country, married a rancher's girl, faced down Roy Maddox, and then done the one thing no one expected. He spared a man's life and gave a woman a choice. Years later, when folks would tell the tale by lamplight and campfire, they always started the same way. She was forced to marry him, they would say, but in the end, she is the one who chose to stay.